Hello and welcome to the second episode of Yes Sir I Can Brewery, the podcast from Bin Day Brewing Company, where we follow our adventures and attempts to start an actual physical brewery. I'm Robbie Knox and I'm joined once again by my co-business owning person, Mike Millar. How are you, Mike?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. I've had a crazy busy week, so I'm really pleased that Friday is here. Which is the day we're recording this. How about you?
Yeah,
had a good week?
Yeah, very good. Good that instantly you've shattered the illusion of how podcasts work. That people thought they were live listening to us as into their ears. I'm very good, thank you. Been fairly busy and stuff like that. Came around doing bits and bobs. But the good news is that the kids have gone back to school.
Yeah.
So I would have more time to do stuff, which is an absolute dream for me. Brewery wise, anything been going on for you, or is it other stuff you've been up to?
So brewery wise, we've just been preparing for our big launch of our next beer, which is coming really soon. So all the stuff that goes on in the background, planning everything out, creating spreadsheets and tables, and all the fun stuff that no one wants to see and people probably don't want to hear about. But that's what's been taken up most of the time.
In today's episode, we're going to be talking to S43, who we're doing these two collab beers with. So we're chatting with them for a bit. But first of all, let's recap on last week's news. As regular listeners, or who listened last week, will know that I am head of finance. Mike is head of mailing lists, and we have various different roles in there. But Mike, you are now head of posts, and I think we should call this feature Mike's Mailbag, where you just tell us what people have said. So have we had any emails or any feedback or anything from people from the first episode?
Do you know what? Everyone has been unremittingly lovely. So thank you to everyone out there who got in touch, and a lot of people did. I think the first bit of feedback, and I think this needs clearing up immediately, was from Michael, whose handle on Twitter is Don't Call Me Mike. So there is a message there. And Mike says, can't decide if at Robbie Knox's new podcast, Yes Sir I Can Brewery, with at Michael D. Miller, about Bin Day Brewing is a pun on Yes Sir I Can Boogie or not. So do you want to solve this terrifyingly complex riddle?
Yes, of course it is. What else would it be, Mike?
So there we
go.
Thank
you for your feedback. There we go. Any other feedback? I noticed a few comments on the YouTube channel about your headphones last week.
Yeah, so last week I was wearing a small child's purple headphones due to these babies not being charged up. Do you know what? They're really, really uncomfortable. Several people have said that should be my thing now, that I should wear small, bright-coloured child's headphones. But I'm sorry to let you down because they are really uncomfortable and I had really sore ears by the end. I actually went off hunting around the house for more kids' headphones, and I did find some lovely Pokemon ones, but unfortunately the attachment was broken. So I'll see if I can up my game on headphones, and by the end of this I'll end up owning thousands of pairs of headphones. I'll be like to headphones what Melda DeMarcos was to shoes by the end of this podcast, I think.
It's an incredible cultural reference.
Yes, we had lots of great feedback, lots of lovely people saying how much they're getting on board with the journey, they're loving learning about how we do stuff. And if you are into that kind of thing, then as Robbie says, we'll be talking to the guys from S43 who we've made our latest beer with, and they're brilliant at explaining everything about beer, how it works, and everything that goes on, the love, the creativity and the passion that goes into doing this stuff. So that's great. We've had people asking if they can work for us. We've had someone saying, Jake saying that he will emblazon his motorbike with our logo and drive it around for us as a sort of a moving marketing apparatus, which is brilliant. And as we said to them, we love people coming back to us, love people engaging with us, and we love people offering their services, and we're saving all of those offers for the right time. And this very much isn't a we'll keep it on file thing. We're really not doing that. We are actually putting it all into a spreadsheet so that we can call on people in our hour of need.
Yeah, when people do get in touch, you are a lot of it are things that will be relevant for us in the future. Because at the minute, there's not much to do that isn't being done by us. And how is your document looking of people?
The document is looking increasingly healthy. It's very subtly named the golden spreadsheet of glory. So, if you want to get your name on the golden spreadsheet of glory, then you'll obviously be very welcome. And we keep updating that, and we keep looking at that to see who we've got and who we can call upon, as I say, in our hour of need. A bit like sort of beery bat signal. So that's great. We've had some great feedback. Ben, who runs a podcast that you are either have been on or are going on soon. What's it called? Bedlam? Something Bedlam? Sorry about this, Ben.
Absolute Bedlam. Yes,
Absolute Bedlam.
I've done it, I believe. I think
fantastic. So go and check that out, everyone. Robbie Knox and Absolute Bedlam. But he threw us some marketing ideas. He said he gets happy birthday offers, so discounts from Gymshark on the mailing list when it's his birthday. He said, and I would, as head of newsletters, as we have discussed in the past, I would love to be able to do all that kind of stuff, and I would love to get to the level of complexity that Gymshark are, because those guys are brilliant at this kind of stuff. But I think that may take another week or two until we get there. He also talked about Beer 52, sending me a book about the history of Beer 52, which is a lovely idea, although kind of the whole point of what we're doing is exactly the opposite. Our book is our YouTube channel, and it's our social channels, and that's what's chronicling our journey in almost real time. So thank you very much for those ideas, Ben. And also Ben and also Craig have both written to us saying, look, if you guys, when it comes to investing time, let them know, because they're interested in taking a piece of the bin day pie. And you've mentioned this before on the last bin day pie. Sounds awful, doesn't it? Who wants a slice of this? What? No one? Okay. You've mentioned this on the last podcast about our plans to get people engaged.
Yes, well, no, 100%, yes, and there'll be lots of opportunities for everyone to get involved in the future. Michael, is your mailbag empty?
Yes, my mailbag is completely empty.
Michael, thank you for emptying your sack for us here.
That line had to come, didn't it?
It was, yeah. I was trying so hard not to do it, but there we go. Thank you very much. Right. Well, without further ado, then let us get into our chat with the absolute heroes at S43, Alex Clark and Alex Rattray. I'm pronouncing it. Alex is the marketing head honcho of S43, and Alex is the brewer. So let's go and have a chat. So Alex, good to have two of the triumvirate of Alexes of S43 here with us today. How are you both?
Yeah, really good, man. Really good.
Doing all right.
Yeah. First things first, brewer Alex, how's the beer tasting?
It tastes really nice. So they're both chilled down now. So fermentation's been complete. Dry hopping stages have all been complete. So we're at the carbing stage right now. So over yesterday and then the rest of today, we'll be adding in some CO2 to carb them up, and then we'll give them another 4 or 5 days in the tank, and then they'll be ready to go. So
fabulous. Are they? Is there much variety from what you expected them to taste like, or is it as you thought?
So, it was the first time, as we talked about before, it's the first time we've brewed with Talus, and me personally brewing a Talus. And I've had a few beers, I've consumed a few beers with Talus in it, but again, not a lot. So, it's a little bit kind of guesswork just based off of kind of what I've read about Talus and stuff. But certainly in the East Coast, it's very Talus forward, I think. And people say it's a lot like Sabro, and I really do get, like, it reminds me of kind of that Sabro, this there's this kind of like candied pineapple vanilla-y thing going on at this stage. And obviously it's a bit hard to tell because the beer will continue to change over the next, week or so as we're carving it up and as it's still conditioning in the tank. But so I think it's even more it's more Talus forward than I was expecting because we've got a lot of other hops in there as well. So that's really interesting. And then, the West Coast version is really interesting because you just, I guess, kind of like we thought you would see some more of the kind of the West Coast vibes out of the Talus. So it's still very Talus heavy, but you do get this kind of really nice pithy. I would say it's instead of just like straight up grapefruit, it might be maybe more like candied grapefruit, but still very kind of pithy, and it's got some nice bitterness to it. The color on the West Coast isn't quite as amber as I would say. It's more of a kind of an orangey color. So the color difference isn't quite as much as I was thinking. I think they're somewhat in line with what I was thinking. But as these things they're always you're using natural ingredients, so it's just a gamble with how it comes out. So
Alex, could I ask if you were going to just sum up our two different beers? Like, what's the elevator pitch for each of them? What are they going to be? How are they going to be different?
Yeah, so they're both featuring Talus. So the West Coast will definitely have a more prominent bitterness to it. So the East Coast will have very, very low bitterness. The East Coast is very soft, and it's got kind of a thick texture to it, and much juicier versus the West Coast, which is definitely more pithy bitterness, has a drier, crisper finish to it. And I would say is maybe the West Coast is less intense in different ways, so it's not quite as aromatic. But I would say flavor-wise, it's probably a bit more intense than the East Coast because all of that kind of citrus and orange kind of hits you right up front. Whereas the East Coast, I would say it kind of eases you into it a little bit. Like it's aggressive on the nose, but the flavor it kind of relaxes you as you drink that one. So I think they'll be really cool and very different.
Could I just ask you for a very, very quick history lesson here? And I know we covered this a little bit for anyone who watched our hours and hours of live streaming when we were making this, right? Can you give us a little very quick history of why does West Coast taste this way, and why has East Coast come to taste or be associated with tasting that way?
Yeah, so it's kind of been an evolution. So kind of the original West Coast IPAs, they took IPA and kind of pushed it to the max as far as the bitterness levels. So the original West Coast, when they were coming out in probably the late 90s, maybe mid to late 90s, they were being produced on the West Coast. So it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with necessarily the water profile or anything. It just happened to be some of the breweries that were pushing these styles. They were in California, in Oregon, and Washington, which tend to be really heavy craft beer, like some of the early craft beer guys set up there. And so there was a lot of kind of exploration with different styles. And so it was just kind of this arms race of like, how many hops can we, cram into this beer basically. And so it was just more bitterness, more bitterness, more bitterness. And obviously when you keep adding in more hops to get that bitterness, you also get different flavors and aromatics as well. And so then they started kind of designing those recipes to emphasize the bitterness. So, adjusting the water to make it more bitter and kind of dry and kind of emphasize that hop crispness to it. And that all originated in England, a long, long time ago. So that's kind of where the West Coast kind of emerged. It just basically took kind of IPA in the States, which was loosely based on IPA in England, and then just kind of took it to a really far direction. And then the East Coast IPAs it was just this really kind of slow progression of kind of the antithesis of that. So it was kind of like, hey, we want to load up these IPAs with tons of hop flavor, but we don't want the bitterness. And then all at the same time, some of these newer hops were being produced that had these really unique kind of juicy elements, which now a lot of people would probably just associate juicy with IPA, but that's a relatively new kind of phenomenon. Usually you would have associated IPA with grapefruit and like citrus and dry, not juice by any means, the kind of these breakfast juice kind of flavors. So yeah, you had kind of the convergence of these new hops being developed that had these kind of really unique flavors. And then some guys, again, it just happened to be some breweries on the East Coast. I think Vermont tended to be kind of a place where a lot of these breweries were doing these like small scale breweries they were producing these super fresh IPAs that they were canning them very, very quickly. And so when you open them, they just had these like crazy aromatics that people just hadn't experienced. And then there were some new kind of hopping and dry hopping techniques that people were just exploring and just kind of, I mean, that's what's so cool about the industry. It's a very young industry. And so there's a lot of, new techniques that people are trying all the time. There's not a lot of hard and fast rules. And so it was trying to get these really interesting, juicy flavors and aromatics into the finished beer. Because a lot of times the way you were doing it with a West Coast is a lot of that stuff was lost along the process. So that's kind of how that emerged as kind of an antithesis to doing it. Same kind of result as far as cramming hops in, or same kind of idea, but very different results, if that makes sense.
Let's go back to the beginning of the collab. Alex Clark, you were the first person to contact us. How did you find out about us and what we were doing?
The visionary.
So I've kind of followed your... Yeah. So I was following the channel, Robbie, your channel over the lockdown. And I saw you doing the brew home kit stuff, and I was like, oh, this is quite interesting, because I'm more the marketing side of things. I don't necessarily get to see the day in, day out of what Alex does, and I've got a very decent understanding and I can talk about it to a degree, but not the level of detail. So I was like, oh, this is quite interesting. I can kind of take this to Alex, have a bit of a conversation. And then I was like, hang on, there's a bit of something we can do here. So then when I saw that you started Bin Day, I was like, this will be fantastic and get a bit of a collab. Not only because I get to obviously chat with you guys, which is fantastic, but we can make something really fantastic. So yeah, that's the reason why I got in touch with you guys.
What were you expecting when you got in touch? Is this sort of what you expected would happen, sort of thing? Is this what we thought we'd be like?
I mean, to be totally honest with you, I wasn't really expecting a response. I thought you guys would be like absolutely inundated with things, so I was like, all right, fantastic, if we can get a response. Because I mean, we've been around for a little while here, but we're not the biggest name in the UK by any stretch of the imagination. So I was just a bit like, all right, if we get a response, fantastic. And then from there, obviously, things have grown. And yeah, I think it's been a really lovely little scenario.
Yeah, I think it has felt really easy to set everything up, and everyone seems on the same wavelength. And I think we both seem to get what each other are doing.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think we were very keen to make sure that you guys had a bit of a story to tell as well along, because brewing is a fascinating process, but as well, if there's no kind of story behind something, it just kind of becomes facts rather than a bit of like narrative. So we were really keen to make sure you guys had that ability to be able to tell a bit of a story alongside it. And when Alex came up with the idea of doing the interactive stuff as well, that was a phenomenal idea. So well done, Alex, mate.
Yeah, well done, Alex.
Yeah, well done, mate.
It's been a sort of different type of sort of collab to, I presume, the ones you traditionally would do with other breweries. Has that brought about any sort of new challenges or learnings or anything like that while we've been doing it?
I think from my perspective, one of the initial conversations we'd had, I wasn't too sure what kind of style we were looking at. I was very keen to make sure we didn't do something too crazy, because I think initially one of the conversations we'd had, there was some conversation about saisons and whatnot, and I was a bit like going from an IPA like Valencian Tip Run to a saison. I think it could either be phenomenal because it's introducing a brand new style, but it's not the most accessible style. So when we started talking a little bit more around the education side of things, that kind of got me really excited. And then the fact that we could do two brews was fascinating, because again, normally we don't do two brews when we're doing a collab. It's usually just the one, but the education side of stuff allowed us to have a little bit more of a play around with things. I don't know, from a brewing perspective, Alex, is there anything which you found a little bit different or learning wise?
I mean, it was weird to have the brew day live streamed. We don't usually do that. So
that was the bad panic trying to get
had to
some
make sure we weren't
there.
doing anything. Had to make sure we weren't doing anything too crazy. But yeah, and then I think, because obviously we've been trying to like document the whole process. So again, that's just been a bit different too. Because typically when I would do a collab with another brewery, like we'd maybe get on with a chat, exchange some emails, settle on a beer style. I'd mock up a recipe, send it over to them. They'd be like, okay, yeah, let's do this, let's change that. And then they'd come for the brew day, and we'd name the beer, and then that's mostly it. But obviously with this, we've done a lot more documenting and a lot more chats, and then about kind of the release and some different things, because generally with a collab we would just be like, oh yeah, we've released this collab and you can go buy it. And obviously we're doing some different stuff with this, so yeah, it's been more involved, but I think it's been refreshing, a little different.
Yeah, I think as well from a marketing standpoint as well, it's really interesting because we tend to just, as Alex says, just go, yeah, we've done a collab. Whereas I think the idea of kind of building a little bit more hype and a bit more context around what you're doing is really interesting from my perspective. It seems so obvious, but I think when you kind of get stuck in a new way of doing things, it now feels like we should do more of this. I know the breweries do a better job of it, but with our resource, perhaps we've been a little bit lax with that. So yeah, it's really fascinating, and it's kind of opened our eyes up a little bit more to what we can do.
How do you feel in general the sort of craft beer industry is around sort of storytelling and explaining, because it is a fascinating world. How well do you think it's traditionally told, that story?
I think it's an interesting question, because the vast majority of breweries are just a very, very, very small team, and they're usually a brewer and a salesman or some kind of probably 3 or 4 people. So when you haven't got the big marketing people behind you, it doesn't necessarily make the most sense to be able to, not necessarily make more sense, but it's harder to put into words what you're trying to kind of get across. So it's definitely something I think the brewery industry can learn from and step forward with. I think, again, one of the great things, I think you said, what was it, rising water lifts all ships, something to that effect, in the last podcast. I think that's really true, and I think if we can kind of help each other out and make each other better at telling stories. I mean, there are some fantastic breweries who can tell some incredible stories, but I think if we can all help each other out, that'd be phenomenal.
Alex, brewer Alex, you thought about of the style, the idea of doing 2 contrasting styles and the live streaming element. So I think you're a bit of an ideas man, aren't you?
Yeah, so that can get me in trouble sometimes. Yeah, I think I've in my my previous life, I ran a restaurant. I've done some other jobs where you just had to be, and I think as a brewer in a small brewery, you know, there's a guy I used to talk to, and he would always tell people, you know, they're asking him like, oh, I really want to get into professional brewing. Like, you know, what should I do? And he's like, well, learn how to be a plumber, learn how to be an electrician, learn how to be an engineer, and then you'll be all set. Because especially in a small brewery, as you guys experienced with us, like, it's a lot of, you know, fixing things, stuff breaks, and you don't have the budget to just be like, oh, let's just get in somebody that knows what they're doing, especially when you're starting from something from scratch. So, you know, when I put together like a little brewery, this would have been, I don't know, almost 10 years ago, you know, I had to learn how to wire up a pump. I had to learn how to, you know, wire up different stuff, and you just kind of have to learn some basic mechanical things. But yeah, I think I maybe have a less traditional background than some other brewers. Like I did some HR work previously, and I think most brewers don't like talking to people. They would much rather just be in the dark cavernous brewery making beer. And I actually enjoy, you know, talking to people. And I used to bartend for a while. I worked in the food business for a long time, so I think some of that has probably stuck with me. And I don't mind just throwing out some kind of random ideas as well.
Could I ask, Alex? You know, you've done all that and you've seen all that. We went to the London Craft Beer Festival a few weeks ago, and anyone who's interested can see that on our YouTube channel. But we got some great advice there, but some of the advice was get stuck in, make all your own mistakes, learn how it works. And the advice was get a good brewer, for God's sake. So what is it, a mix of both?
Yeah, I'd say a mix of both. I mean, you need to have some idea what you're doing. And I think also, you know, when I was first starting out this little brewery back in Texas, this was 10 years ago, the industry was much more forgiving back then. Because things were much newer, and so people were okay with like giving you some time to get adjusted and to get better. And I think now the industry is so much more competitive. If you don't have good beer out the gate, it's going to be really tough for you. You don't have to have perfect beer, and you know people will certainly buy into your story and will support you on a local basis. But again, there are just so many options for people, and there's so many breweries making great beer that yeah, it's just a much tougher competition nowadays. So yeah, I think having someone who knows what they're doing on the beer side is really important. You're going to make mistakes. There's going to be stuff that breaks. Our kettle door fell off last week, so we had to dump a batch of beer down because we were getting ready to boil it, and the hinge on the door was about to give out. So we had to just stop the brew, dump it down the drain, get a welder. That's something we can't do because we don't have a welder. That stuff just happens, unless you've got all the money in the world and you buy the perfect kit. And even that, I was talking to another brewer, I won't say who, but they've got this big fancy new kit that they just bought, and their mash tun just like broke, and it's not even like 6 months old or a year old. And so it happens no matter how nice your equipment is, stuff breaks. So having some, getting in there yourself and trying to make workarounds, because that will help you down the road. So
I've got this picture of you, Alex, on your knees, just with like hot beer splashing all over you, going, no! Tears streaming down your face.
It's surprisingly, this actually happened while I was on holiday, so thankfully I wasn't even in there, but I definitely would have been doing that, except the beer would have been too hot. It would have burned me. So
someone else broke it.
I'd like to try to recreate that.
the live stream, the one that we did live on Twitch, went well, I thought. I've got a few stats from it in front of me now. We did a 6 hour and 41 minutes once we eventually got it working. The highest at any one point was 234 viewers at one point. Overall, over 2,100 people watched some of it. 3,000, just under 3,500 views in total, because people came back to it. I think, and it was at one point, I think, because we were sort of downstairs. But Alex, I think you said it was like the second biggest in the world at one point of food and drink stream. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was second. I can't remember what the first one was, but we were fighting a lot with them. There's some pre-recorded things that were already on Twitch.
Oh, they don't count.
So, technically, I think we should say we were number one.
Number one. Okay, marvellous. Good, yeah. So that it went well, didn't it? I mean, what were your feelings about the live stream?
From my perspective, I loved it. I mean, I don't know how on earth you guys kept up your energy for so long. I think when the live stream finished, just a little bit behind the scenes, so you guys looked absolutely knackered, but you did an incredible job. So, because I had other bits of work to do throughout the day, so I was kind of watching it up in the office. But no, it was fantastic. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I don't know from Alex's perspective if there was any interesting parts.
Yeah, I really enjoyed just the questions, because I think for a lot of people, I don't think it happens quite as much anymore, but it used to be. People would ask a lot, like, oh, I'm really interested in home brewing, or I do home brew, I'd love to come for a brew day. And it's just not a super practical thing. We're, as you guys know, we're a small brewery, tight space, and to have a stranger in there for 8 hours or whatever, they could get hurt, and there's just, and you're busy and stuff. So I thought that was a really unique opportunity for some people that were interested, like, oh, I'd love to see how a brew day goes, but you can't go to a brewery and actually, see behind the scenes. So, but yeah, just some of the questions that were coming through were really fun. And I think for a lot of people, especially, if maybe you're a little into craft beer, but again, the majority of people just kind of, drink it, don't think about it necessarily a lot. And I think most of those people would imagine a brewery like this big warehouse with all these shiny tanks and everything, and obviously our brewery is not that way, and a lot of breweries are not that way, and so I hope it kind of let people behind the curtain a little bit to see, when most small breweries, like, it's a lot of work and you're not working with the best equipment, and so I know one person said on the live stream, like, oh, I didn't realize how much work went into a pint of beer, and I thought that was probably the coolest comment, that if we helped educate a few people, just like, this is what goes into making the beer that you drink, and hopefully it helped people kind of have a new appreciation when they have a pint.
And I think that's a crucial point for us, Alice, right? Because particularly with the audience we're looking at, who perhaps are getting into craft beer, for the first time, or they're a bit into it and then more. I think a sense of the time and care and love and process and ingredients that goes into that, is super important story to tell, because normally if you're paying £1.50 for a can of beer or something like that, which is absolutely fine, brilliant, but I think it's a big jump to ask people to pay £5 or £6 for a can of beer. But as soon as they understand the time and effort that goes into making that, or crafting it, the clue's in the description, right?
Craft, yeah.
I think all of a sudden it makes a lot more sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think
in terms
especially
of where we are. Oh, sorry. You go, Alex.
Sorry. I was just saying, I think especially like people, they want to be connected with like who's making their beer. And obviously in a giant warehouse or something, there's less human element, which can be a good thing for consistency and stuff. But I think, generally people are more than happy to pay more money when they can see, like you said, that handcrafted element. It's like, this isn't just like made by robots somewhere else. Like there are people that it's their passion. They're coming up with like cool ideas, and they are doing the blood, sweat, and tears to get this made. So I think that does add value, I think, to the product. Obviously, we hope the beers taste great as well. But I do think, getting to see the human element of it, I think does make the price jump worth it too.
Yeah, I think with lockdown as well, that really helped people understand a bit more about it, because I think when they start drinking Budweiser or Coors Light regularly, they were like, it's getting a bit kind of samey. They wanted to try and explore a few more bits and bobs, and they'd sign up to the likes of Beer 52 or whatever it was, and they'd get these beer subscription packs, and they'd try all these different things and not quite understand what it was, but they're like, oh, this is quite interesting, and they'd go and buy some more, and I think from there they're understanding that the quality, well, not necessarily the quality difference, but what you're getting is a very different product to your, say, big macro breweries, so to speak. So yeah, I think lockdown was an interesting place. A lot of the lads who I play rugby with made the comment saying, oh, I spent £4 on the can. I was like, oh, well done, guys. Like, but it's just quite interesting to see this transition from, as I say, the macro stuff to the more the micro and craft scene, and allowing people to explore at their own pace is quite important as well. I think I made the mistake when I first started working for the brewery. I gave my dad my dad absolutely loves Kronenberg. It's just all he drinks. And there's a brewery called Omnipollo, and they do this Bianca series, and it's phenomenal. I don't know how it's classed as a beer, but it's the most ridiculous thing. I gave him a little taste of that. It was a mango lassi gosa, and he just was not expecting that, and he just spat it everywhere. I was like, that's appalling. He just was not in a happy place. Anyway, over the next year or so, I've kind of like drip fed him bits and bobs, and there was an eggnog Bianco which they did at Christmas, and he had to say to him, that's not too bad. And I was like, it's a very similar drink to what you spat out a year ago, but now you're kind of going, oh, it's not as bad. So I think context again gives a lot of clues and is quite interesting, but allowing people to explore at their own pace. You can't just jump straight in at these crazy flavours. You need to kind of understand what you're liking as well. Preference is big. I love sour beers, but I know not everyone loves sour beers as well. People much prefer stouts, or they like IPAs, or there's so many different variations. You've got to understand what you enjoy.
And on that stout front, can I just say, I've got your what is it, something like 10 or 12%, the Beast Imperial Stout sitting in my fridge, and it's kind of just staring at me whenever I open the fridge, and like daring me to drink it, and I haven't actually plucked up the guts because it's just. I have drunk it. Powerful drink, fantastic.
It's fantastic. I wouldn't describe it as sessionable. I wouldn't.
No, it's definitely not sessionable. As well, I'd argue the last couple of weeks as well haven't necessarily been stout weather.
No.
So probably leaning in towards Christmas. I think it should be. It should be good.
Stout
We've got the barrel aged version of that as well, which is incredible as well. Yeah, exactly. Stout weather.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of where we are at the minute, so we are recording this on Friday the 10th of September, so we're a week away from release. Just behind the scenes, I mean, we know what's happening with the carbonation of the beer, but what's happening elsewhere around the release of the beer to give people an insight into what's going on?
So the product will be... There'll be a secret link which you guys will be sending out to your mailing list, which will be going live on Friday, I believe. And then from there, you'll be able to buy all of the beer that you need. Then from there, I think we agreed it was either the Monday or the Tuesday. After that, it'll then go to general release, and then everyone can get their hands on it, providing it's not already sold out. But you guys get priority, obviously.
Super. And canning is happening on Wednesday?
Wednesday, yeah.
Yep, on Wednesday, I'm sure we'll have some photos and stuff. It is always a stressful day, yeah. So we use mobile canners, so we are too small. We don't have enough space for our own canning line yet. So yeah, we have guys that come bring the canning line to us, hook up to the tanks, and can the beer. But yeah, it is always just there's just a lot that can go wrong, or sometimes the carbonation level is a bit off, or the beer temperature isn't maybe. There's just a lot of variables. So yeah, it is generally, I find it more stressful than the actual brewing days, because there's just not a lot you can necessarily do to fix things on the day of, because we have mobile canners. If we're not ready to go, if the beer's not right where it needs to be, it's not like, oh, we'll just do it tomorrow. They're not going to be out for another 2 or 3 weeks or something. So it does bring some stress. And it's just like, you guys know the space is really tight. So we've got 2 more guys in there. We got a big machine. We got to move stuff all around. It's a bit of a faff. And then obviously we're going to be putting 4,000 cans roughly out. And for a small team, I mean, that takes us quite a while to do. So it's
Can I ask,
eventful day.
Alex, can I ask, is what comes out of the tank does that what goes in the can? Is there any extra carbonation that you add on the way? Is there any stage between big metal container and small metal container?
No, not really. So basically, the cans, they go on the canning line, and then they'll get purged with CO2. So there's like these 4 little pins that come down inside the cans. They go 4 at a time. They're purged with CO2, and then they're filled with beer, and then the lid comes down, and then it gets seamed, and all of that happens within about 10 seconds, 12 seconds for each one. But especially when you're dealing with really highly hopped beers, like oxygen is your enemy, and so that's the big thing that I always worry about, is how much oxygen are we picking up when we're canning, because even a small amount can really mess with the flavor of the beer, especially over time. So we do everything we can to minimize oxygen pickup in the tank, and then also when it's being canned. But it is really just hooking up a hose to the tank, and then it flows in through the machine, and it's all just done by pressure. So we put CO2 pressure on the tank to push it all in there, and yeah. So it's...
And when you say purge, can I just ask, what does that mean? It sounds really aggressive.
Yes, it's not quite like the movies, but so you're basically just trying to purge the oxygen out of the tank, or out of the can. So there's CO2 so those little pins go down there, blows CO2 in the bottom, and that as CO2 is heavier than air, it should push out the oxygen in the air that's in the can. And then it does it again when it's filled with beer. So it's filled again from the bottom, so hopefully that all pushes up to the top. And then you want a nice fob, what we call, on the top, and then that helps push, again, some of the remaining oxygen hopefully out of the can, so that we get very, very minimal pickup before it gets the lid and seamed on it. So
it's quite an amazing process as well. I can remember when I first had my first canning day, and I couldn't believe how everything just automated, and automated to a degree. It was quite soothing. I think I've got about 1,000 videos of me just trying to get slow-mo, the can spinning and everything going on top of it. So yeah, it's a fascinating process. I'm sure there's some scope for some ASMR scenario in there. It's really quite soothing. Really quite soothing.
When I worked in broadcast, the one fallback we always had whenever we could was can lines. Yeah. When I was doing broadcast stuff, the one thing you'd always fall back on, if you possibly could, was like that kind of factory stuff, and it's called factory porn in sort of news environment, because it's mesmeric and everyone loves it. So I think we could just have a bin day channel that's just cans going past for hours.
I think that sounds like a cracking idea.
Yeah,
if we want to really rack up the hours, Robbie, if we want to really rack up the hours on YouTube, let's just put up a 6-hour video of cans going past. Yeah.
One of the other things that we haven't mentioned yet, I don't think publicly, is the first pour event we're talking about doing. Briefly, what is a first pour event traditionally?
So, to be fair, we've done a few kind of tap takeovers, so to speak, where we go in, we'll find a place where it's happy to take a large portion of our beer, and then it's like first pour, have a nice little sip of it, and then kind of enjoy and chat amongst others about what the beer is, and kind of go from there. I think with your setup, it's going to be slightly more interesting because you guys are going to be there recording the full thing. So that's kind of how we typically do it. As I say, it's a bit of a tap takeover. Alex, again, if you got more insights into that.
Well, just like this will be a little bit different because it'll basically be the only place in the country you can try the beer before the cans are released. So I'm sure Robbie will give more details about the pub and the location and things, but so we're going to get 2 kegs, a keg of each of the beers down to this pub, and it's basically like a pre-release, kind of early screening kind of thing, so that it'll be, the first people in the country that get to try it out in the wild, because it won't be released really until the following week. So, for people that are just foaming at the mouth for it, that'll be the best way to do it.
The pub we are referring to is, of course, the Happy Hour podcast favourite pub, The Murderers, Norwich's finest. Boozer, arguably. That's the plan anyway. We're just trying to make sure that everything works and they've got the right connections. But in theory, that is. But keep an eye on our social channels, and that will be on Friday the 17th. You coming up for it, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be up late afternoon, early evening to get stuck in. Wonderful stuff. Overall, just wrapping up then, how's the experience of the club been overall for you, S43 guys?
I've loved the whole process, to be fair. It's I've got the least stressful job. I've literally gone, hey guys, let's make something exciting, try to have a few conversations with people, and then kind of let Alex do the hard work, and himself do the hard work. So from my perspective, I've loved it. Alex, I'm not too sure if you've got any other thoughts on that one, but it's been a pleasure.
It's been pretty horrible. So, no, I'm just kidding. No, it's been fun. It's been really different, like I said, because typically, you're collabing with another brewery that's already up and running, and so to have you guys in, which bring different perspective, and to have, again, a lot of it documented is really interesting. You sometimes, I think, when you're in the industry, you think, dude, people actually care, about this, because it's just, we do it on a day-to-day basis. Do people really care about the different hop flavor compounds or the history of different beer styles and stuff? But anytime we do, anything like this where we can kind of connect with people in a really direct way, because as we don't have a tap room, unfortunately, so we get very limited kind of person-to-person interaction and to be able to talk about the beers unless we do a tap takeover or something. To have some feedback directly with people on the day of the brewing, and I'm sure we'll see some more, at the first pour and some different stuff. So yeah, I think that's been a really cool experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fabulous. So if people are interested in the beer, the way to guarantee getting it is to sign up to our mailing list at bindaybrewing.com. You will get an email on Friday the 17th explaining how you can purchase this. Alex, you'll probably have some knowledge about how it's being sold. Is it both beers in one package?
Yes, so we've got a variety of different sizes of package. So to speak. So I think we're doing it in 6s, 12s and 24s, if I remember correctly. But it'll be split, so there'll be half the pack will be the east and half the pack will be west. So you can get a nice taste and compare and contrast. But yeah.
Fabulous.
That's
anything else exciting you guys have got coming up that you want to talk about?
Not off the top of my head. Alex, is there anything which is particularly jumping out at you as being newsworthy?
Let's see. We've got some other collabs that are coming out. So we had Brew York come up.
That's a good point.
The brewers from Brew York come up about 2 weeks ago, and we're doing another autumn pumpkin-themed beer. So we did one. People may remember we did one with them last year. That was a pumpkin spice latte stout. So we are doing something similar but amped up. So higher ABV content this time. We'll also be putting some of that in a barrel. So that's exciting. And then we have our next barrel release coming out next month as well. So we did the Beast in the barrel. So we basically have one whiskey barrel or one bourbon barrel. And so at first it got filled with the Beast, and now it's gotten filled with something else, and that's been sat in there for probably about 6 months now, I think. Maybe even a little bit longer, 6-7 months. And so that'll be getting released next month, I believe. So that's kind of exciting.
Fabulous.
And we've also got some new merch dropping as well, which will be happening over the next couple of weeks. So we've got some new glassware and a few new t-shirts and whatnot. So
people want to get that, S43brewery.com.
That's the one.
That's the one. There you go. Head over there. Wonderful stuff. Well, thank you very much for the chatting. Very excited for the release of the beer. Mike, anything to add?
No, I just think it's been an absolute pleasure. It's been an education, and I've been literally writing down all your sort of bon mots the whole way through, which we're going to steal for our socials, because you are very, very good at this storytelling thing. So we expect to see you as the voice of the industry sometime soon.
Sounds good.
Brilliant.
He's a marketer's wet dream. Yeah.
Brilliant. I
don't know how I feel about that, but okay.
Brilliant.
Yeah, wet dream.
Yeah, right. Okay, brilliant. All right, thanks, guys. Thanks, and we look forward to tasting the final beer. So there we go. That was our chat with Alex and Alex of S43. Lovely guys, aren't they, Mike?
Oh, absolutely brilliant guys. And as we said over and over again, and as particularly Alex Brewer, Alex the Brewer kept showing, they're brilliant at this storytelling thing, which is exactly what we're trying to do. So it's an absolute joy working with them.
If you are interested in tasting the two beers, which I don't think you mentioned the names of them in that, they are Pacific Days, which is the West Coast beer, and Atlantic Nights, which is the East Coast beer, both a pair of IPAs using Talus as the base hop. They will be out on Friday to everyone on our mailing list. They're hopefully going to be absolutely magnificent. So sign up to the mailing list if you want to get guaranteed first options to buy them, because there's no guarantee they'll get to the public sale element of it. So that's happening. Hopefully, for anyone in the Norwich area, Friday the 17th, we'll be having the first pour in the Murderers, but keep an eye on our socials for that, because we're just waiting for confirmation that everything is going to work, and that checking. It's technical stuff about whether they've got the right connections for their kegs, essentially. And yeah, just thanks for listening. Subscribe to the podcast if you've enjoyed it. Drop us a nice little 5-star review if you fancy it. We're going to start reading those out in the next couple of weeks. And yeah, thanks for everything.
And can I just say, if you want to get on the newsletter, that is bindaybrewing.com. There's a couple of forms, one on the screen, one that pops up, and that will put you on there, and you will be sent the secret link for the beers. And as Robbie says, we're not hoping, but we're thinking that they will all more or less go before they go out to the general public. So that's the way to get them.
Okay, marvellous. Okay, thank you very much, Mike. I will catch you next week for a lovely catch-up, and probably speak to you in the middle of the week because we run a business together.
Yeah, we have the small matter of a beer to launch next week, which we are super excited about, and lots of stuff coming out, lots of great content coming out about how you design a can, what goes into making a beer can, all the content around our live brew, our 7 hours, which Robbie is compressing into rather less than 7 hours, and hopefully we'll be getting pictures from the canning line. So, as we mentioned in the interview, a nice bit of factory porn there, Mike, as well. So lots to come. Really exciting times.
I've been trying to end this podcast for about 5 minutes now, and every time I say goodbye, you start talking again. It's like some band that won't stop doing encores.
Well,
just goodbye.
And when was the last time you were at a gig and you thought, I really hope he doesn't do it?
Bye.